It was a Tuesday evening. Not a special day. Just one of those gray, rainy evenings where the world feels a little heavier than usual. I was sitting in a small diner on the edge of town. The kind of place with sticky menus, cracked vinyl booths, and the smell of old coffee hanging in the air. It wasn't fancy, but it was quiet. And after the week I'd been having, quiet was all I wanted. I was nursing a cup of coffee, staring out the window at the rain, when the bell above the door jingled. In walked an old man. He must have been in his late 70s, maybe early 80s. He was wearing a worn-out baseball jacket, the kind with patches on the elbows. His pants were damp from the rain, and he was carrying a simple khaki cap in his hand. He looked tired, not just physically tired, but soul tired. The kind of tired you see in people who have carried a heavy weight for a very long time. He sat down at the counter, 2 stools away from me. I saw him glance at the menu, then at the prices. His eyes lingered there for a moment longer than they should have. He ordered just a cup of black coffee and a small bowl of soup. The cheapest thing on the menu. The waitress, a woman named Brenda, I'd later learn, was not having a good day. She slapped the coffee down in front of him so hard it spilled into the saucer. The old man didn't complain. He just quietly used a napkin to soak up the mess. When his soup came, it was lukewarm. He ate it slowly, methodically, like a man who had learned to appreciate any food put in front of him. I didn't think much of it at first. We see people down on their luck every day. We look away. We pretend we don't notice. But something about him kept pulling my attention. It was his hands. They were rough, knotted with age, but they rested on the counter with a kind of dignity. And his posture. Even sitting on a diner stool, eating bad soup, his back was straight. Too straight for a homeless man. Too disciplined. I watched as he finished his soup and pushed the bowl away. He sat there for a long time, just staring into his empty coffee cup. It was like he was stalling, like he didn't want to leave. Or maybe like he didn't know where to go next. When Brenda dropped the check on the counter, I saw his shoulders drop, just a little. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a worn leather wallet. He opened it and I saw the problem immediately. He had a few crumpled dollar bills. Not enough. He counted them twice, moving his lips silently. My heart sank. I've been there. We've all been there. That moment when you realize you don't have enough money to pay for a simple meal. The embarrassment. The shame. It hits you right in the gut. He looked at the check, then at his money, then back at the check. Brenda was at the other end of the counter, scrolling through her phone, ignoring him. The old man cleared his throat. Miss, he said. His voice was deep, gravelly, like stones rolling in a river. Brenda didn't hear him. He tried again, a little louder. Excuse me, miss. Brenda looked up, annoyed. Yeah. He started, and I saw a flash of pain cross his face. I think I'm a little short. Is it possible could I wash dishes or something to make up the difference? Brenda laughed. Not a kind laugh. A sharp, mocking laugh. Wash dishes? Old man, we have a machine for that. You got cash or not? The old man's face turned a deep shade of red. He looked down at his hands. I'm sorry, he whispered. I must have miscalculated. It was in that moment that I made a decision. I don't know what came over me. Maybe it was the look in his eyes. Maybe it was the way Brenda was treating him like he was garbage. Maybe it was just the universe whispering in my ear. I stood up, walked to the counter, and put my hand on the check. I've got this, I said. Both of them turned to look at me. Brenda raised an eyebrow. The old man looked confused, then embarrassed. No, young lady, he said, shaking his head. That's not necessary. I'll figure it out. It's just soup and coffee, I said with a smile. Please, let me. He looked at me for a long moment. His eyes were pale blue, watery. But behind them, I saw something powerful. A deep sadness, mixed with a flicker of gratitude. He nodded slowly. Thank you, he said. His voice cracked on the word. I paid the bill. It was $7.53. I left a 10. I didn't want change. I just wanted to leave. I felt awkward. I didn't do it for thanks. I did it because it was the right thing to do. As I walked out into the rain, I thought that was the end of it. A random act of kindness for a stranger. I'd probably never see him again. I got in my car and drove home, feeling a little warmer inside despite the cold rain. I had no idea that this small moment was about to turn my entire life upside down. A week passed. Life went back to normal. Work, bills, the usual grind. I had almost forgotten about the old man in the diner. Almost. Then, on Friday, I came home to find a small envelope sticking out of my mailbox. No stamp. No return address. Just my name, written in perfect, old-fashioned cursive handwriting. The kind of handwriting my grandfather used to have, loopy, elegant, and precise. I opened it inside my apartment. Inside was a single sheet of heavy, cream-colored paper, the kind you don't see anymore. And on it a short note.
"Dear friend," it began.
You don't know me, but you reminded me last Tuesday that kindness still exists in this world. You saved an old man from a moment of great shame. I would like to repay you, not just for the meal, but for your dignity. Please join me for dinner this Saturday at 7 p.m. at the Jefferson House. Just show them your name. Sincerely, Harrison. Beneath the signature was a phone number. I stared at the note for a long time. The Jefferson House. That was the fanciest restaurant in the city. The kind of place where reservations were booked months in advance and dinners cost more than my rent. There was no way this old man could afford that. Was this a joke? A prank? I almost threw the note away. But something stopped me. The paper. The handwriting. It felt official. It felt important. I decided to call the number. It rang twice. A deep voice answered, General Harrison's residence. I almost dropped the phone. General. I stuttered, hi. I received a note from Mr. Harrison. About dinner. The voice on the other end softened. You must be the young lady from the diner. The General has been hoping you'd call. He is very much looking forward to Saturday. Shall I put you down as confirmed? I was speechless. Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Excellent. Just give your name at the host stand. The General will meet you there. I hung up and sat on my couch, my mind spinning. Who was this man? Why was he called General? And why was he inviting me to the most expensive restaurant in town? Saturday came fast. I spent an hour getting ready, putting on the nicest dress I owned, which wasn't very nice, but it was the best I had. I drove to the Jefferson House, my hands sweating on the steering wheel. The valet opened my door. I felt so out of place. I walked inside. The restaurant was all dark wood, white tablecloths, and soft piano music. I approached the host stand and gave my name. The host's eyes widened slightly. Right this way, ma'am. He led me through the main dining room to a private room in the back. And there he was, the old man from the diner. But he looked completely different. He was standing as I entered. He wore a perfectly tailored dark suit, a crisp white shirt,
a tie,
and pinned to his lapel was a small American flag pin. His white hair was neatly combed, and his posture, that straight back I had noticed before, now made perfect sense. He smiled, a warm, genuine smile that lit up his weathered face. Please, he said, pulling out a chair for me. Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would. I sat down, completely overwhelmed. Mr. Harrison, I don't understand. What is all this? He sat across from me and folded his hands on the table. First, he said, let me properly introduce myself. My name is Harrison James. I am a retired general. 4 stars. United States Army. I just stared at him. The man I had seen counting crumpled bills in a diner, the man who had offered to wash dishes for a bowl of soup, was a 4-star general. He must have seen the shock on my face because he chuckled softly. I know. It's a lot to take in. The waiter appeared with a bottle of wine. The general nodded, and the waiter poured 2 glasses. I didn't even know what kind of wine it was, but it tasted like nothing I'd ever had before. The general lifted his glass. To kindness, he said. The rarest currency in the world. I clinked my glass against his, still in a daze. He set his glass down and looked at me. You're probably wondering why a man with my background was sitting in a cheap diner, unable to pay for soup. I nodded slowly. Yes, that's exactly what I'm wondering. He took a deep breath. For a moment, the powerful general vanished, and I saw the tired old man from the diner again. Because, he said, my family, my own flesh and blood, left me with nothing. And then he told me the story. General Harrison James had served his country for over 40 years. He had commanded troops in battle. He had shaken hands with presidents. He had dedicated his entire life to service. When he retired, he had a comfortable pension. He had a beautiful home. He had a wife he loved more than anything. But 3 years ago, his wife passed away. Cancer. It took her quickly. And when she went, the light in his life went with her. He had 2 children, a son and a daughter, both successful, both busy with their own lives. At first, they checked in on him, called every week, visited on holidays. But slowly, the calls became less frequent. The visits stopped. Then, 6 months ago, his daughter came to him with a proposal. She and her brother had been worried about him, living alone in that big house. They thought it would be best if he sold it. They said they would help him manage his finances. They said they would find him a nice, smaller place, an apartment, easier to maintain. The general, lonely and grieving, trusted them. He signed the papers they put in front of him. He didn't read the fine print. Why would he? They were his children. They sold the house. They took the money, over $1 million, and they invested it in their names. They left him with a small monthly allowance, just enough to cover a tiny studio apartment and basic food. They told him it was for his own protection, that they were managing his estate so he wouldn't have to worry. But the truth was far darker. They had stripped him of everything: his home, his savings, his independence. They visited him once after the sale to drop off a few boxes of his personal belongings: his wife's photo albums, his medals, his uniforms. They dumped them in his tiny studio and left. He hadn't seen or heard from them in 4 months. I was too proud to ask for help, he told me, his voice low.
Too ashamed.
A 4-star general, begging for his own money back from his children. How does that look? I thought about calling a lawyer. I thought about going to the press. But I couldn't. They are my blood, my legacy. How could I destroy my own children? He looked at me, his eyes glistening. That night in the diner, I had spent my last $20 on a bus ticket to see an old friend, a fellow soldier. I thought he might help me. But when I got to his house, I learned he had passed away 2 months earlier. I had no money left for the bus home. I was hungry. I was lost. I walked into that diner because I needed to sit down. I ordered the soup because I was starving. And then, I couldn't pay. I felt tears burning in my own eyes. This man, this hero, had been betrayed by the people who should have loved him most. His own children had stolen his golden years. Why are you telling me this? I whispered. He reached across the table and took my hand. His grip was surprisingly strong. Because you restored my faith. You didn't see a homeless old man. You saw a human being. You didn't ask for anything in return. You just acted. And in a world where my own children saw me as a bank account to be drained, you saw me as a person. We talked for hours that night. He told me stories of his time in the army, of the battles he'd fought, of the men he'd lost, of the medals he'd earned. He was a humble man, deflecting praise, always giving credit to his troops. By the end of the night, I felt a fire burning inside me, a deep, righteous anger. This man had given his life to his country. He had raised those ungrateful children. He had loved them, and they had robbed him blind. I didn't say anything that night, but I made a decision. I was going to help him, and I was going to make sure his children faced the consequences of their betrayal. The next week, I started researching. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a detective. I'm just a regular person with a laptop and a lot of free time. But I was determined. I asked the general for copies of any documents he had. He gave me the papers he had signed. They were thick, confusing legal documents full of jargon. But I started reading, line by line, word by word. And I found it. Buried deep in the contract was a clause about power of attorney. His children had tricked him into signing over full power of attorney to them. But there was a catch. A mistake they had made. The document required 2 witnesses to sign in person, verifying that the general was of sound mind. The signatures on the document were there, but the addresses listed for the witnesses were fake. One was an abandoned building. The other didn't exist. The document was legally questionable, possibly even void. I called a lawyer, a real one, a young, hungry attorney who specialized in elder law. I explained the situation. He was interested, very interested. We met with the general. The lawyer explained that we had a case, a strong case. We could sue for the return of the assets. We could press criminal charges for fraud and elder abuse. The general sat silently for a long time. Then he looked at me. What do you think I should do? It was a heavy question. These were his children, but they had treated him worse than a stranger. They had left him to rot. General, I said softly, they didn't just take your money. They took your dignity. They left you ashamed in a diner. If you don't stand up to them now, they will never learn. And they will do this to someone else. He nodded slowly. Do it, he said. We didn't just file a lawsuit. We set a trap. The lawyer sent a letter to the son and daughter. It wasn't a threat. It was an invitation. It said that their father was considering changing his will and wanted to discuss the family estate with them. It said he was feeling lonely and wanted to reconcile. It asked them to meet him at his lawyer's office to discuss a possible gift. They showed up. Of course they did. The promise of more money was like blood in the water. I was in the next room, watching through a one-way mirror. The general sat at a large conference table. His son, a slick man in an expensive suit, walked in first. His daughter followed, dripping in jewelry. They didn't hug him. They didn't ask how he was. They sat down and immediately started talking about the estate. Dad, the son said, we're glad you're finally being reasonable. We've been managing everything so well. We can talk about increasing your allowance if you cooperate. The general looked at them. His face was stone. My allowance, he repeated. The money you stole from me. The daughter laughed nervously.
Stole.
Dad, we're protecting you. You're old. You don't understand finances. At that moment, the door opened. The lawyer walked in. Behind him, 2 police officers. The son stood up. What is this? The lawyer placed a folder on the table. This, he said calmly, is a lawsuit for the return of assets and a criminal complaint for fraud and elder abuse. You are both under investigation. The daughter's face went white. The son started yelling. You can't do this. We're his children. The general stood up. For the first time, he looked like the general he was.
Tall.
Commanding. Powerful. You stopped being my children, he said, his voice like ice, the moment you left me with nothing. You took my home. You took my wife's memories. You took my pride. But you forgot one thing. I spent 40 years leading men into battle. I don't lose. And I don't forgive betrayal. The police officers stepped forward. They read the son and daughter their rights. The daughter was crying now, mascara running down her face. The son was still yelling, threatening to sue, to call his lawyer. But it was over. They were caught. I watched from behind the glass as they were let out in handcuffs. It was the most satisfying thing I have ever seen. Justice. Cold, hard, absolute justice. The trial was short. The evidence was overwhelming. The fake witnesses, the drained accounts, the neglect. The son and daughter were convicted of felony elder abuse and fraud. They were sentenced to prison time. Not long, 3 to 5 years. But long enough to sit in a cell and think about what they had done. The court ordered the return of all assets. The general got his home back. He got his savings back. He got his dignity back. A few weeks after the trial, the general invited me to his house. His real house. The one his children had stolen. It was a beautiful old colonial, surrounded by oak trees. He met me at the door. He was wearing a simple sweater, but he stood tall. He led me inside. The house was warm, full of books and photographs and old furniture. It smelled like history. He took me to his study. On the wall hung his uniform, his medals, a portrait of his late wife. And on his desk, in a simple frame, was the check from the diner. The $7.53 check I had paid. I want you to have this, he said, handing me a small box. I opened it. Inside was a medal. Not his. A new one. Engraved on the back were the words, "To my friend, for restoring my faith. Dignity is priceless." I started crying. I couldn't help it. He hugged me. A strong, fatherly hug. You didn't just buy me soup, he whispered. You bought me a future. It's been 2 years now. The general and I have dinner every month. Sometimes at his house, sometimes at a little diner, the same one where we met. Brenda, the waitress, doesn't work there anymore. I heard she got fired for being rude to customers. Funny how karma works. The general is thriving. He started a foundation to help elderly veterans who have been exploited by their families. He speaks at events. He's become a voice for the voiceless. He says I gave him a second chance at life. But the truth is, he gave me something too. He showed me that one small act of kindness can ripple out and change the world. Those kids, his children, they thought they had won. They thought they could steal from an old man and get away with it. They forgot that the old man was a lion. They forgot that every action has a consequence. They forgot that betrayal might get you money, but it will never get you peace. As for me, I learned the most important lesson of all. You never know who you're sitting next to. That stranger in the diner, the one down on his luck, the one you ignore. He might be a hero. She might be a genius. They might be someone's grandparent, someone's whole world.
Be kind.
Not because you'll get a reward, but because kindness is the only thing that truly lasts. The general taught me that money can be stolen. Houses can be sold. But dignity. Once you restore someone's dignity, that's a debt that can never be repaid. And sometimes, the quietest acts of kindness lead to the loudest justice.